Jen loves cooking. She makes everything from scratch, like an old Amish woman.
That's the Mormon in me. Thank you very much.
Is that a Mormon thing? Do they make
It
everything?
is.
They make everything from scratch?
Yeah.
Is there a religious reason for that?
And it's because everyone's super poor because they have a lot of kids and the women have to stay home. It's like so I think it's just part of the way the culture is. Plus the fundamental side, which we can get into later, of my family, the one that remained fundamental when the church broke off between polygamy and not having polygamy. The fundamental side remained quite what's the word I'm looking for? Stuck in the 19th century.
Like kind of archaic?
Yeah, just it's not just making it's not quite like the Amish. I mean, they use modern day conveniences and technologies, but their attitudes towards things and is very archaic. So the cooking goes along with it. Everything is from scratch and then some, if that makes sense.
That makes sense. That's interesting. Yeah, so Jen will be talking a lot more about her experiences in Mormonism and in Islam. I'm just a lifelong atheist. I was not brought up religious at all, which I think is also very atypical. It's not typical of most people. It's very rare to
I
find
never
somebody.
met anyone. You're the first one that I've ever met that was a lifelong atheist. That actually, I shouldn't say. The first one that I've ever gotten to know.
Yeah, it's hard to find another one, even for myself.
Mm.
But in this episode, we will be talking about the Me Too movement, which has gone global recently. And basically, it is about women sharing their experience of sexual harassment or abuse. There's also the Time's Up movement, where it's time's up for the men who have committed these acts. That's a more recent one from this last January. So
January 1st.
Yeah, so just a few months ago. And yeah, it's not the easiest topic to talk about. I don't have any experience with that personally. Jennifer does. In a past podcast we did on my other podcast channel where I interviewed Jen, the Law de Gosh podcast, she spoke about some of these experiences, and these experiences from women, sometimes men, in fundamentalist religious communities or cults is very typical. And so a lot of the interviews I've done with women about their being brought up in fundamentalist religion, it's always part of it. It's always there. So I thought it was important that me and Jennifer talk about this subject, and Jennifer really wants to talk about this subject as well. It's not the easiest thing for a man, especially a man without any of those kinds of experiences, to have an opinion on it, I think. So I'm going to try and give an opinion, but respectfully to the point where I don't have those experiences myself. But I think it's still relevant, though, Jen, because that's one of the issues, right? To call it, it's about people, especially women, calling attention to these experiences to people who it hasn't happened to, so they can try and understand it, right? That's part of the whole point of the Me Too movement, I think, right?
Yeah. Well, you even not understanding what we were discussing earlier, not understanding that men may not be aware that women are harassed as much as they are. And not being aware of that as a woman, you think, well, why don't you know this? You know, why aren't you on my side? Why aren't you listening to me if you know this is happening? So it creates a feeling of anger and feeling let down, really abandoned. And so I think that if there's more communication and we're a little bit more open about it, and to not be afraid of talking about it, I think it's good. I think opening up those lines of communication will help women, I hope. Because I didn't know that some, with your story, you weren't aware. You can talk about it, but that you weren't aware that women were harassed as much as they are. And that
Yeah.
makes a big difference to me.
Yeah, and I think it's a good place to start because I kind of would like throughout the podcast to talk about kind of the less aggressive aspects of Me Too to the more egregious stuff that has happened. So starting with catcalling,
Yep. Good idea.
kind of thing, and then the stories we hear about Weinstein and things like that. So kind of building it up, and we'll get to the more horrendous stuff towards the end. But coincidentally, it was a video from 2014 for me that really changed my thinking about this a lot. It was a video called 10 Hours Walking in New York City as a Woman. And in the video, a woman walks around New York City, they film her, and she just gets catcalled throughout the video. And I knew the video would be edited to just the points where that happens, so it builds up a lot. And then I was thinking, okay, but this is still it's a YouTube video at the end of the day, but it went viral and everybody was talking about it. So I asked some women I know about catcalling. I don't have a girlfriend currently, but I had a girlfriend at the time. But before I asked my girlfriend, I asked my friend's girlfriend, who I had seen the same day I think I saw the video, and I asked her, have you seen the video? She had, most people had. And I asked her, well, do you get catcalled? She's like, yeah, of course. I'm like, how often do you get catcalled? And she said, every day. It's like, every day? I was like, yeah, but just once a day? She's like, no, like multiple times a day. And that was very shocking to me. If you had asked me how often women get catcalled, because I knew they get catcalled. I'd heard women talk about it. I had seen it happen. But certainly I didn't think it was happening to a woman every day. I thought in their life, maybe it had happened to them a few times. You're
That's
laughing.
adorable.
Yeah. And then after my friend's girlfriend who I'd spoken to, I asked my girlfriend, really wondering what the hell she was going to tell me. And I asked her, like, have you seen the video? She had seen the video. And I asked her, well, do you get catcalled? And she's like, yes, of course. I was like, how often? And she said, every day. I was like, is it multiple times a day? She's like, yeah, of course. And I'm thinking, as the protective male, like I'm going to have to start walking around with my girlfriend punching every guy who looks at her on the street. I didn't know what to think. I don't know what to think exactly about the fact that my girlfriend was just getting harassed multiple times a day. I didn't think I went from thinking that wasn't happening to it was.
You're like, those men are pigs.
Yeah. And I don't know how to deal with that because, if I was with my girlfriend and some guy yelled at her or approached her or touched her in a weird way, I would get very furious. I'd be very angry, possibly even violent, depending on what he did. Right. So I don't know how to deal with the fact that my girlfriend is just walking to work or just walking around the city every day, and that's happening to her constantly. Like, you can't protect somebody that much. And I also didn't know this was happening that much. So, and after that, I asked a lot more women, how much is this happening to you? And they're like, every day. And what surprised me was how they said it. They didn't say it like it made them angry or it was something that made them furious. I'm sure it did, but the way they said it was just like, yeah, of course that happens.
Yeah,
like
matter of fact,
it's just part of their lives. They would
reality.
I was basically they were reacting like I was asking a really stupid question. Like I was as if I had just asked them, do you drink water or do you breathe air? And I asked them, were you harassed every day? And they're like, yeah, of course. And I don't think most men know that. I didn't know that. And most men think they know about women. I thought I did. Men have men
do.
Yeah.
They do think that they have women all figured out and they can tell women. I can't even tell you the number of times in relationships I have had men tell me what I think and I feel and how I should be a woman and what it means to be a woman.
When you're sitting around with men and you start talking about women, every guy at any age, doesn't matter if they're 15 or 45, the minute like they start talking about like, oh, how women think, all guys are like, hold my beer. I'm gonna explain to you guys what women think, what they're like. Like, I just got this down. I think I had kind of that attitude, and after that, and especially everything else that I've been discussing with women, and on top of that, how much sexual assault has been happening in the workplace. If you had asked me about like a woman being sexually harassed or assaulted in the workplace, I would have thought, yeah, of course that happens. I didn't think it was happening as much as I'm reading about.
Or shops, church, school, everywhere. The other thing, as a woman, and I'm sure some men, when there's been aggressive, larger women that are harassing them or abusing them, they also have to navigate this. But as a woman, generally the men are larger and stronger, and you have to navigate the waters of, if I ignore this man, is he going to get angry? If I turn him down, is he going to get angry? If he catches me making eye contact, is he going to approach me and hurt me? There's all these variables that you have to go through when reacting to the harassment, in deciding how you're going to approach it or not deal with it, if that makes sense. So it's like a minefield every single time, because there are some men that will approach you and say something really disgusting, and if you ignore them, they will get angry and attack you even because you're ignoring them.
You know what else I thought, Jen? I really hate when I have like a negative encounter with somebody in the street. If you understand what I mean, like when somebody, I don't know, says something or pushes me or just says something to me, it's not just that like it's a negative encounter, but it kind of throws me in a bad mood. And it makes me angry that I'm in a bad mood for no reason now for the rest of the day. And so I was thinking, if that happened that typically, you have to kind of normalize it, I guess, in your head. If not, you would be angry every day, right? I mean, I guess, because I mean, thinking like, oh, the negative encounters that I sometimes have that piss me off and ruin my day, women are having this encounter every day, multiple times a day. Mm-hmm. It's just like, what does that do to you psychologically? Like,
and it's not even strangers.
Because I don't. What did you say?
It's not just strangers.
It's not just strangers?
No. It's if you go to work and you're working with people and you see them on a regular basis, you're still getting harassed by the people in the workplace. There's still men in the workplace that are looking at you, or in it's very obvious that they're looking at you in a sexual manner. I know that's used by, he hit on me and I feel like he harassed me, or I think that there's a fine, I don't know about a fine line or gray area, but there's a difference between someone looking you up and down like a piece of meat and just looking at you and maybe noticing the fact that you have maybe a tight top on. If that makes sense? There is a difference.
I understand also the problem there is that when you try to describe these things, it comes out very awkward and very subjective, right? Like, oh, he was looking me up and down. And a person thinks, well, I look somebody up and down. Like, I don't think I'm being sexually aggressive. But then, like, there's so many subtleties about how people do things, right? Little, like, facial expressions, things you can't really describe.
Licking their lips while they're doing it.
Oh, God.
I mean, just like there's really creepy things that are added. Comments as they walk by. I've walked into an office with a superior who over time kept making more and more kind of lewd comments walking by, and until it culminated into him saying, I'll go down on you right now. Like I really want to go down on you. And I'm like, what just happened? What? Like I
right there
I
in
did
the
not
workplace?
have time. Yeah, well, we would go into the back and he wanted to take me out, but that was his, let me go down on you. And
how did you react to that?
Pardon?
How did you react to that?
I I remember his face was really red when he said it, and he turned around and like he looked me in the eyes and said it, and I just stood there and didn't say anything. I didn't know what to say or how to react, and I laughed very, very awkwardly and walked away. I didn't know what to say.
Can I ask you something?
Sure.
Because I'm trying to figure out all this stuff because I'm absorbing all these things that women are talking about, and they're really new. Like, I'm getting close to 40, and these are new things to me. I think these are new things to men. Some men might have known about this. I don't think most men do. I'm sorry. I know for a fact most men don't know about how much of this stuff is happening. We don't. I know that. Because when I talk with men, no, this is not how we think women are living their lives. So, but what I want to ask you, in a situation like that, I know a lot of men will say, because this is now a typical thing I see online, is like when a woman is sexually harassed in the workplace, men are very quick to say, like, why didn't you report it? Why didn't you report it? Like without understanding the kind of situation you're in. And a lot of people mention the power dynamic in a situation like you just mentioned. But my question is, in a situation like that, is there also just like a fatigue that comes from having these encounters so much to the point where you feel if you do react too much to this, you would have to react that way to every time this happens, and it happens every day, and you just can't live like that. Is that part of it, or no?
It is definitely part of it. There is part of you're just tired of it, and it's so common and so normal. When that particular, I've had a lot of incidences of harassment at work. Usually people that I worked with that were not my superiors, and I turned them in. I told, and I never. It was never handled well. I was blamed, or it would always lead to me having to leave the job because I couldn't work with that person. I didn't know that there were laws that said that they couldn't do this. I don't even. I didn't even know that it was wrong. I just knew that it was uncomfortable, and when I complained, that's what I said. That it made it impossible to work with this person. So this particular superior, I didn't know that what he was doing was wrong. Like, I didn't know. I knew that he shouldn't be saying that at work, but I didn't know because of a power dynamic or that it was harassment. I just thought it was like he was just hitting on me, but I just didn't like it, and I didn't want it to happen anymore. But I didn't know if that. I don't know if that makes any sense. I just didn't know that it.
Yeah, it makes sense. It does.
So when I did report it, nothing was ever done about it. So as time goes on, and the more it happens, I think that I'm just being ridiculous, and I'm blowing things out of proportion. I'm just being an overly emotional, suck it up and just deal with it kind of thing. Like, this is just the way the world works. This is what you have to deal with.
I've been watching a lot of interviews with women about the Me Too movement and women sharing their experiences. And I think it's not fair of men to just immediately jump to the conclusion every time you hear these stories and the woman didn't report it to just say, well, it's your fault. You didn't report it. If you hear enough of these stories, there are so many reasons why it's not reported. There's power dynamics. It's your boss. Sometimes if you lost your job, sometimes these are single moms or people who need that income. Another thing is, like, you don't want this to take over your life, to have some kind of legal battle for God knows how long. There's no proof other than your word for it.
That's the big thing. Not it's just your word.
There's so many reasons. There's a lot of reasons.
When they say you haven't turned them in, you didn't say anything. Well, yeah, usually women do say something, and because it's your word against theirs.
That's something I saw in the Weinstein case. Is like, I did see some interviews of women said they did come forward. They did get lawyers. The lawyers went to the police, and then the problem is it was just came down to their word versus Weinstein's, and they had to settle out. Because almost every one of those cases, that's all they have is your word against his. That's not proof. He's much more powerful than you. He has a lot more money than you. You'll never win the case. So the lawyers and everyone around them is telling them, don't go to court. You'll lose. And so just your best way of getting anything out of this, any kind of justice, is to settle out of court.
Mm-hmm. Get money.
But then people say, well, why didn't you come forward? Well, a lot of these people do. And sometimes if they don't, well, like if you're an actress, do you really want to be known? I mean, if you're a really unknown actress, do you really want to be known as the person who, took Harvey Weinstein to court for sexual harassment, and it's just your word against his? A lot of other producers could be like, I don't want to work with that person. What if they accuse me of sexual harassment? Then you can't work.
Oh, for sure. You won't ever work again.
And that's might be later on the only thing you're known for, right? The only thing you're going to be famous for. And you don't want that. I can imagine, like, you want to make a name for yourself as an artist, and you don't want to be known just as the person who, took somebody to court in a lawsuit. I can imagine that. That's a perfectly reasonable position to have. You don't want this to take over your life. These things are not over in a week. That's naive to think that. These things can take years, sometimes decades. So
it's all victim blaming, and I'm not down with any kind of victim blaming. Those people that were upset that the actresses didn't report it, or they took settlements and just so that they could keep working. Yeah, because the ones that did report it didn't work anymore.
Yeah. But again, Jen, I want to highlight the aspect that the more I hear it, the more I see these women give their accounts, I can understand why they're pissed, but they have to understand, like I was saying, I don't think it was in the podcast. We were talking outside the podcast, but I can understand how this builds up into anger, and then women come out and they think, why aren't you guys taking my side? Thinking, I know this. Oh, women know this. And all men obviously know this. That's where I think I'm declaring I'm ignorant, and I know most men are ignorant, but I think women are ignorant of men's ignorance. Yes. So to break that down is like so men don't know what's happening with women, and women think that we do know, and then that causes a resentment or like a frustration and anger. But I'm telling you, men don't know. Like you have to walk us through it, like little by. It sounds very SJW what I'm saying right now, like the whole men need to shut up and listen to him, and you shouldn't phrase it that way. Don't phrase it that way, because men are going to shut down. You gotta. I think. I think I've been really lucky, Jen. I gotta say, because you've heard a lot of the interviews I've done with really amazing women, right? And these women on the podcast and a lot of times off the podcast with more personal details are telling me things, and I think like it's coming in a better relationship, a better back and forth, where we're starting off so friendly, and then they're just like laying all this stuff on me, and so I can absorb it in a more friendly manner. But if they come to me out of nowhere, right, just on Twitter, and they're just like, you gotta shut up, Lalo, and just listen to women. All men need to shut up. Like I can't move forward from there. Do you know what I mean?
I don't think anyone could or should move forward from that. That is the quickest, especially with men. That is the quickest way to shut down dialogue. If you know men at all, as a woman, you know how to talk to men. Men and women are not the same.
Yeah, no, and that's. But I want to add, I understand why now a lot of women approach it that way. It's just so much built up frustration, much built up anger, and thinking like all of this system is broken, and I shouldn't have to live with this shit every day of my life. I can't imagine. I mean, I was just thinking, like, my girlfriend's going out every day and she's being, sexually harassed and catcalled. I mean, she did. I mean, the crazy thing is like my girlfriend and my friend's girlfriend and other women I talked about it like they had just accepted it as part of life.
Well, you have to, or you're going to go crazy.
And they're telling me, and I'm losing my shit over it in the moment, and they're just looking at me like, "Aw, lol," "Aw,
Aw.
you just finding this out." Aw. Right? And I'm getting angry. I'm getting frustrated. I'm like, what the hell is happening? Well, on the meantime, they're people in their 30s and they've been living with this their whole lives. And I understand, like, they're just looking at me like, yeah, duh. Yeah, we're used to this. This is how it is. And that's a very big part of it. The kind of jaded nature of just like, we accept this. And I have lived in many countries. I always have a lot of friends, a lot of female friends. I didn't hear about this. It's not, and I understand why. I understand why women are not going to just bring this up in casual conversation about being sexually harassed and catcall. It's just, you don't want to bring it up all the time. There's a sense of shame, I think, that comes with it, where it's just like, it makes you feel like icky and gross. Right. Mm-hmm. And you just don't want to share that randomly with people.
You'll get the blame a lot of times too. So, what were you wearing? What were you saying? Did you smile at them? Did you make eye contact? What were you doing to encourage that kind of behavior?
I'll be generous to myself and think that the girls I know didn't think I would react that way. I totally agree with you that many men would.
Oh, no way. No.
Even them knowing I wouldn't react that way, they don't tell me. And I'm trying to think why. Do you know what I mean? Like, why even...
Oh, I thought you meant like in general. Just you in specifically.
But men like me, right? Men like you, like, for example, you know me, right? Mm-hmm. I'm not going to react that way. Like, try to victim blame, right? But you're still not going to tell me about every catcall incident you had in the day, right?
That's true.
So why? And I'm thinking, like, why not? Well, it's not like... I guess in part you would have to talk about it every day. It would just occupy all conversation or something. I don't know. I'm trying to figure it out.
If it happens so much, it's like you don't even pay attention anymore. It's not like maybe one specific incident would stand out if it was a particularly egregious kind of incident, but like generally they kind of all blend in together because it's just so common. So it wouldn't be something that you would just bring up and okay, let me put it, how I will say things that sound insane about, things that happened in my religious past.
Everything you talk about your religious past is insane.
Okay. So something to do with the Mormon church, right? And you're like, what? But I say it so matter of fact.
Yes.
Like it's nothing.
Very nonchalant.
And it's not like to you, it's like earth shattering.
Yes.
And I had never brought it up before. I didn't think it was, because it was nothing to me. So I'm not going to mention it or it just came up in conversation. So do you see what I'm saying? It's the same thing. You've normalized it. It's just so common.
Haven't we also talked about how a lot of the greatest feminists you and I admire tend to really reject the victim complex and the victim label?
Yes.
Like, and I think, and I mean, you can correct me if you think it's something different, but I think it's that the women we admire, a lot of the women who have had these experiences, I think they have to overcome it by being extra tough. And if they just put if they get themselves in that victimhood complex, they wouldn't be able to emotionally survive it, I think. Am I right? Do you think it's that?
No, you're right.
Yeah.
Well, I'm no victim.
And you've been through a lot, Jen. I mean, with all the stories I've seen, even from the Me Too movement with Weinstein, books I've read about women going through lifelong horrendous stuff. Later, I'll talk about, like, I read Rose McGowan's book, Brave, and that woman has just been, like, sexually abused her whole life. Even in comparison with you've been through a lot, and you constantly will go on about how you're not a victim, because you're a strong person who I admire a lot.
Aw, thank you. Aw, he never says nice things to me. If I have been hurt and abused and raped and molested and beaten up and subjugated and degraded and by men. very few women in my life have done anything bad to me. It's except for maybe the hard line, strong Islamic ladies that kind of pushed me into getting abused more by men. But it's really just been men, and every man, almost every man that I have trusted and brought into my life. That being said, all men are not the problem. Men are individuals, and I do not look at men as a whole and say, you are responsible for this. The same way that I am not a victim. I have been a victim of terrible things, but I'm not a victim now. I'm a survivor. And going forward, if something bad happens and somebody abuses me or hurts me, or I am the victim again of something, I will be a survivor of that as well. If I reveled in my victimhood or the terrible things that had happened to me and not come out of it stronger, I wouldn't be alive today. I would have successfully taken my life. There's no way. Emotionally, there's just absolutely no way. Exactly what you're saying. You cannot handle it. So you have to be tough, and it's not a matter of just suck it up, kid, and get over it. You have to find an inner strength when you have been through unimaginable horrors. There's something inside of you, a fire, and it just you find it or you don't find it, and it's a matter of coming out of it stronger and better and wiser, and wishing sure that you hadn't been through those things, but knowing that going through those things gave you perspective and strength that you didn't even know that you had. So in a way, you're kind of grateful.
Can I mention the Rose McGowan book that I read?
Yeah.
So in my interest on this topic, I read Rose McGowan's book because she's a very, very big outspoken person on the subject of Harvey Weinstein, who sexually assaulted her, and on the Me Too movement in general. Although how can I put this delicately, Jen, about Rose McGowan? Anybody who's seen a video with her
She's
interview,
broken. She
seems emotionally very unstable.
She's broken. She has been broken, and she's sick.
So I read her book. It was a good experience to read the book. I don't know if I would recommend it for everybody because it is pretty much nonstop sexual abuse. That's in the entire book.
Didn't we talk about, you said not for me not to read it?
You wouldn't be able to read it. Yeah, if you're a survivor of this kind of stuff and you suffer from PTSD, don't read this book. She gets into very great detail about sexual abuse. It's useful for a person like me who's trying to understand it more. It's not for everybody. And also, I mean, you could probably get as much from, if you're interested in this subject, from just watching a lot of interviews with in the Me Too subject. You wouldn't really need to invest into reading the book. But I got, a lot of good from the book. It was beneficial for me to read it. But Rose McGowan, she grew up in a religious cult, I think in Germany. It was a branch of cults that exists in many countries called the Children of God, I believe. And I mean, from the cults where she didn't spend too much time in the cult, just when she was very young, and then she moved to the United States, and then every relationship, with the exception of just one, who was Marilyn Manson when she was dating him, every person she was with or encountered sexually abused her. It was just nonstop, over and over, and it just doesn't stop in the book. Me and Jen have talked when I was reading the book, I talked with Jen some about it, but one part I didn't mention to you, Jen, is, do you remember Rose McGowan kind of became popular again when she was denouncing a sign of the movie X-Men, Age of Apocalypse? Do you remember this incident?
Mm-mm.
So Rose McGowan was protesting that there were billboards around LA where Apocalypse was grabbing Mystique by the neck. Do you remember this?
Oh, I remember that billboard.
And do you remember there was a big protest about it?
Yeah.
This was Rose McGowan who was pushing this. And so
I didn't know that.
She mentions, I mean, I remember it, and I kind of, mocked it on Twitter, not too hard. Like I'm not that, but I found it silly, like that people were claiming it was like reinforcing abuse and misogyny towards women, having Apocalypse grab Mystique. I mean, I grew up reading X-Men, right? I've seen countless pages of X-Men and X-women fighting villains, right, and getting into fights and getting beat up and stuff. So to say that image was like misogynistic, it like sat very weird with me.
Right.
In the book, she talks about it, and towards the end. Now, I didn't really know what to make of Rose McGowan before when that story first came out. I just thought, like, is she being sensationalistic? Is she looking for clickbait and attention? After reading her book, it's totally 100% understandable that she saw that sign and just got flashbacks and triggers and endless PTSD of all the men who probably grabbed her and hit her in a similar way to that she saw on that billboard.
Yeah.
That is totally understandable. After reading that whole book and you get to the end and you get to that part, you're like, oh, okay. So that, I mean, again, that book helped me to understand why women would react to something that seems benign to me, but is a big deal to them. Now, all that said, I still don't agree with her protest of the sign because her life is not typical. I mean, you would say this about yourself, Jen. Jen's life, life is not typical, Jen.
No.
Right? It's not.
No, not at all.
It's not even going to be close to most women who had the lives of Rose McGowan or Jen and are going to look at a sign of superheroes fighting a villain, and they're going to be like, this is encouraging misogyny. And also, I still think, even after reading her book, she's being counterproductive in some ways, because do you really want popular culture and media and movies not to depict women in a violent situation battling a villain or a man? Do you see what I mean? Like,
yeah, she's going over the top because she's particularly triggered. But we talked about this, though. Yeah. I know that my life experience has been exceptional. And yes. I don't expect people to cater to me, because I know my experiences are unlike 99.9% of people. So I'm not going to insist that people cater to my feelings, my triggers. That's ridiculous. And Rose, I think when I say that she's broken and she's sick, she cannot see that. She's still broken.
She cannot see what?
That
she has problems.
Her experiences are exceptional. Yes. And that she can't expect people to cater. Her experiences are not every woman's experiences. So when she gets upset about something and is triggered by something, and I'm using triggered in the right way, because I really don't like using it. I used to mock. We could talk about that too.
Yeah, we'll talk about that definitely. Yeah.
I think that if she was not as broken, or she was able to mentally be healthier, she could see that and she could make allowances for that, and not, because it really isn't healthy mentally to be so upset and so tremendously upset over something that really is only pertinent to you, and expect everyone else to get just as riled up and upset about it. And it really is just like this vicious cycle you get into. It's really not healthy, and it's not going to help her grow or get better. And that should be her goal, is to get better.
Yeah, I mean, you didn't read the book, but I definitely noticed that in the book, and I saw many interviews with her while I was reading and afterwards. There is at no point is there any recognition that her assumptions about men and sexual harassment or abuse of women, that her experiences altogether is rare. She always spoke as if this is just the way people are brought up. Now, on top of that, she also spoke about how women are brought up at a young age versus men. But from what I can gather about her life, she spent the early part of her childhood in a cult, and then never really had normal upbringing as far as schooling or university or anything like that. So if you were brought up in a cult, and this is a cult that's a cult, like living in a
like a commune kind of cult,
a commune compound, isolated from the rest of, like, she talks about how the cult would sometimes go into the city to try and evangelize, right? And they're living in an isolated way. This is cults living in an isolated community, commune kind of way. She can't really, if that's her life, she can't say women are brought up in X way and men aren't brought up
how
in
would
X
she
way.
know?
That's the thing. I'm like, most people are not brought up in a cult, especially the kind of degree of cult she was brought up in. So, and I mean, I got no impression that her life has been normal. I mean, imagine, she went from being in a cult in her early life to kind of having this gray area where she's moving to Hollywood and becoming a star. And then just a few years later, she's a superstar in Hollywood. So she went from being in a cult to being a major Hollywood actress. This is
no normal life experiences at all.
This is nobody's life. Nobody's life is this, right? It's fascinating to read about. It's interesting, but it's not typical. Now, the incidents themselves are indicative of things that happen to women at some degree everywhere. Not as much as happened to her, but what like we've been talking about, that to some degree this does happen to women, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, what you were saying about triggers. I mean, we could talk about that. I mean, I sent Jen, for example, a movie to watch. Egyptian movie called Cairo 678. That's by Mohammed Diab, an Egyptian filmmaker, because the film is about sexual harassment and sexual assault in Egypt. And I wanted her to watch it so we can comment about it. This is a very hard movie to watch. And I even warned Jen, I'm like, I had to like stop watching this movie like a good 5 times because it's pretty explicit visually about this, and it's not even that, it's not how sexually aggressive the assault is. It's just it's because it's so well done as far as like the reaction of the women, how they're breaking down. And it's also like there's one of the main stories, because it's about 3 women. One woman is just constantly sexually harassed on the bus to work every time she takes the bus. You know, she gets felt up, she gets touched, and she just starts to break down because it happens over and over and over. And she starts taking taxis, but she spends all the money she makes it from work to get to work on taxis. So she's losing all her money just to get to work. And you can literally see how she starts breaking down emotionally and mentally throughout the film. And it was really hard for you to watch that, right, Jen? I remember you saying.
I only made it through the synopsis, that short video that kind of had little bits of each one.
That's it?
And I made it through that, and then I started to watch the full movie, and I couldn't do it.
Like really early on.
Yeah, I could not.
Yeah. Again, it's a useful movie for me to watch. I think everyone should watch it who can watch it. But trigger warning, we make fun of that term, but honestly, like this is a film, like if you have PTSD from this kind of stuff, this is going to be a very hard film to watch. You probably just shouldn't watch it, to be honest. But men should. Men who don't know a lot about this, who haven't faced sexual abuse, some have, should watch it. It's also very interesting as far as Egypt and the Middle East, and is how sexual assault works there. One of the women in the film, Jen, she's like groped on the street, and she takes the guy who sexually assaulted her to the police station with her family, and the police officer there won't write up the report. He won't do it. So they literally take the guy, they put him in the car, the family, and take him to another police station to write up a
Wow.
report. And then in the movie, she's on the news as the first woman reporting a sexual assault in Egypt. Now, if you don't know, to the people listening, sexual assault in Egypt is really typical. Like I mean, even for Middle Eastern countries, it's kind of out of control in Egypt, from what I've read about. In the film, that character, out of the three characters, she comes on a show and they say, you're the first person to report a sexual assault case. Now, I thought, is this just the movie, or is this somewhat true that there hasn't been a sexual assault reported ever? So I go online and I read some articles about the movie, and you guys should look it up. The movie's called Cairo 678. It turns out in 2008, there was a woman named Noah Rushdie. She was the first woman to report a sexual assault or a sexual harassment case. 2008, Jen.
2008?
2008 was the first time a woman had reported sexual assault, despite it happening every day to almost every woman. They don't report it.
This is the first time they would actually, well, they try to report it, but they don't.
I mean, look,
They
it could be, especially in a place like Egypt that's so complicated, it could be for infinite reasons. One,
You have to bribe them.
like how would they even report the guy, right? Like, how do they get them arrested? Second is, like, they feel so much shame because of the shame and honor culture, and chastity and all that is so important.
Yeah, you can't admit to being assaulted in an Islamic country. There's no way.
People think you're dirty, used, and you don't have any value after being sexually assaulted.
Yep.
There were other parallels with the movie and reality. For example, in the movie, after she goes on TV, the father of the girl says, people at my office are saying that, you've been paid by Israel and stuff like that to do this and ruin the name of our country. And the real woman, Noah Rushdie, she was accused of being an Israeli citizen, and she had to, like, officially show that she was a citizen of Egypt because of all the conspiracy theories around her. So people will try to ruin you. It's
just for saying that you were
sexually assaulted. Yeah, there's so many things about, like, just this movie and that story. So, you guys should go check it out. But that was an interesting part of, like, what's happening in a place like Egypt. But
there's a lot of films and triggers are weird. You never know when they're gonna
talk
show
about
up.
triggers,
But
Jen. Talk about triggers.
I will go to a place. Say I hadn't been to in a long time and the last time I had been to that place, particularly I'm thinking of a parking lot, and the last time I had been in that particular parking lot, I was assaulted. And it didn't even take me going back to that particular parking lot. It took a commercial for the store on TV to come up. And all of a sudden, I was right back. And when I say right back, and I've explained this to other people, when you have like a PTSD attack, it's not that you're right back visually to what happened. You're not replaying it in your mind. At least that doesn't happen to me. What I mean is there's a feeling of panic and terror. It kind of washes over you like waves, and you're right back. I felt sick and dirty and guilty, and I couldn't breathe, and I felt like I was going to die from a commercial on TV. I had no warning. I didn't. And if a person had walked by and saw me reacting like this, they probably would think I was crazy because there was no rhyme or reason to it. So I used to, prior to my experiences with, I've had PTSD my whole life. I didn't know that I had it. I don't know if that sounds crazy or not. I didn't know what was happening to me, the panic attacks and the hyperventilation and the self-harm. I didn't know any of that was symptoms of PTSD. That was just my life, and I dealt with it. So in learning more about PTSD and having some of the symptoms get a lot more severe over time. They kind of come and go. I mocked people like I'm so triggered, and I really don't like the way it's used as a weapon, so that you can shut people up because you say I'm triggered, so you need to shut up. Whereas for me, I mean, it's a real thing. Like it affects and disrupts my life, and I don't know when it's going to happen. So I'm not going to say to another person, you can't do this or you can't behave this way because it's going to affect me, if that makes sense.
Yeah, the thing about triggers and how it's mocked now and people laugh about triggers, the fault of it becoming a mockery is not exactly the fault of the people who are mocking the term. It's the fault of, like you said, the people who weaponize the term. So instead of actually describing it as something that makes you react and initiates your PTSD, it triggers it, something you look at, something you hear, etc. A lot of social justice warriors or feminists or whatever you want started going to events or, in conversations with people they didn't like. They would use triggers to what I'm pretty sure you can clearly see is a way of shutting somebody down. You can't say, you can't talk about sexual assault. You can't say this about rape on stage because, hey, you're triggering me. And then they need a safe space where they play with Play-Doh and stuff like that. It's making a mockery of it, and it's using it as a weapon to shut someone else up. You can't say that because it's a trigger to me. But then these people were going to events where they're going to talk about subjects of sexual harassment and rape on college campuses or something like that, knowing they're going to, as soon as that subject is going to come up, they're going to shut the person down saying it's you're triggering me. And that's not, I think, how people with real PTSD and triggers work in the world. I don't think they go out of their way to look for conversations that would trigger them like these people are doing.
Why would you? I mean, why, as a person who's been through the experiences I've been through and has been as hurt and as much as it brings back horrible feelings and memories, and why would I go out of my way to hunt that down to make people stop talking about something I would never have been exposed to in the first place had I not tried to hunt it down? It's not like these people are talking about these things in order to hurt me. That's not the way it works.
I mean, an example of people abusing the whole trigger thing is, do you remember those meetings of like feminists in some university, and they would make the audience snap instead of clap?
Yeah.
Because they said, oh, well, clapping can trigger some people, so let's snap instead of clap. And it's just like, that's making a mockery of it, I think.
It absolutely is. It's so insulting. I get angry.
I mean, and another thing is, like, let's say something like clapping, like bringing up rape, could trigger you, and you, like, let's say you have been sexually assaulted, you do have triggers, you do have PTSDs, but you want to participate in the conversation at these events with it. I understand that, but you can't ask the world to adjust to your PTSD and your experience. Is like what I was talking with the Rose McGowan thing. I understand now, because I'm trying to really hard to understand these experiences and why these things happen. I'm not putting it down at all, but I still think that, for example, Rose McGowan can't demand that an action scene in an X-Men movie can't be shown because she's reacting and she's having a PTSD flashback to something, and therefore the billboard can exist. It would be much better if it would be much better if she explained her experiences and why something like that can make her react. But you can't adjust the world to your experiences. I don't think that's practical, and I also don't think that's a good way of even helping people to understand what's happening to somebody like Rose,
or get over it,
or any of those things. I mean,
honestly, no. You can't live your life. Well, I have PTSD. I have these triggers, I have these problems, and everyone needs to cater to me, and this is the way it's going to be. This is life. That's just the way it is. No,
Yeah,
that's
it's
you
not.
have to be stronger. You have to, because each attack is less and less and less severe. Now it goes through waves, and I'm talking about my own personal experiences and the experiences of people that I know with it, and the times that I've spent in mental hospitals because of my issues. Getting to know people like me and that have been through the same kinds of things as me. There's times when it kind of, say somebody dies in your life, and it triggers a new wave of having to deal. It brings something else up. I don't know how to explain this. So say something terrible happens, somebody dies, and it will bring up a whole new thing to deal with. So it can trigger a new PTSD event. And I call them events because they can last anywhere from a couple days to a couple months to years. And if you take that and you don't fight it and you try to understand it, they do become less and less severe. But if you expect everyone to cater to you, and you need safe spaces, and you need the world to be aware of your feelings and make everything super soft and comfy and safe, right? All it does is exacerbate the problem, and it's going to keep the PTSD attacks, if they're real, as bad as they are. You will never get any kind of relief. And there's kind of a tough love approach to it too. There's a give and take there. And this may be a little controversial, I don't know. If you're walking into a room and you're asking people not to clap because it will trigger people, or people can't say a particular word because it's going to trigger somebody, you're not a victim of PTSD. You do not have PTSD. There's no doctor on the face of the earth that's going to tell you that you have PTSD unless they're making a lot of money from you. And it's no.
Oh, you're that sure about that?
Absolutely.
I mean, you would know better than me, but
there's no way.
yeah.
There's no way that a victim of abuse that has genuine PTSD is going to walk into a room and tell people that you can't clap because it's going to trigger me. Trigger what? It's just, you do not have PTSD. I have much more colorful language to describe people like that. I have no time for that. And
why do you think that that's happening? Like in that situation,
because there's strength in victimhood. There really is. There's a thing now where people find that being a victim makes them, you get attention, there's strength in it. So bathing and reveling in that, going places and announcing, I have PTSD, so you can't clap, or you have to watch the words that you say on stage for a group of people that have come to hear you talk, right?
Yeah.
Like, you have to cater to me because I'm a victim. Everyone needs to know that I'm a victim. So you all have to change because I'm a victim. It's just so egotistical and so. No, you're not a victim. No.
Yeah, I mean, so much as, I mean, there's a lot of things about modern culture, especially with millennials, can be traced back to the fact that everybody is desperate for attention and they don't know how to get it, except being very extreme. Like, politics has become more extreme. Identity politics, people like, I identify as a helicopter, I identify this way. Or being a victim. There's a lot of ways, right? Highlighting certain things about yourself to garner attention, because everybody really wants attention, especially online.
It's not healthy.
No, it's not healthy. And another thing is, a lot of these people are now attacking, for example, that there should be no depiction of sexual violence in films. And that worries me because, for example, I mean, I just talked about a film that I thought was very good to watch. I would suggest people watch, like Cairo 678, that very explicitly shows sexual abuse. I don't think the world would be better for men. Like, I mean, we talked about so much in this podcast about how ignorant men are of this. One of the best ways to express this to people who don't know what it's like is through film, because it's hard to get people to understand this through a tweet, a Facebook post, even a short, even interviews sometimes don't do it justice. I mean, really showing that in a film with the acting and the emotion and the trauma and showing it in the form of a story, I think does a lot. But then there's the opposite side of a lot of women and feminists especially saying, like, no, this to show abuse encourages abuse, therefore don't show any of it. Therefore, people are never going to see it. I mean, I've heard this trope a lot online about, from like Game of Thrones or some movie or something, like don't ever show rape, don't ever show sexual assault in a film. And I mean, I'm a bit older, and I remember in the late 80s when the film The Accused came out with Jodie Foster, and how and it was a huge deal because rape had never been depicted really in films, especially not a major film. And it was breaking ground to show sexual abuse and rape in a film. Right? It was uncomfortable for people. They showed victim blaming. It showed something new that people didn't want to talk about, and I mean, they didn't maybe know about because a lot of people don't talk about it. But so there's this weird area where it's just like the Me Too movement wants to get it out there, but at the same time, they're kind of pushing back, like, don't show it in certain mediums. I don't know. I feel like there's a lot of conflict and in the mixed messages going out there.
Well, it's like trying to ban books or songs that are, or games even, the violent games cause violence, or, those ideas are present anyway. Those assaults are happening anyway. That having rape depicted in movies didn't cause rape. And you're right. I think it for some people that could be their first introduction to it, that it's even going on, and to see the violence that's associated with it. The thing that it's like with sexual assault and harassment and things like that, and my word versus your word, and the only time you can really prove that something happened is if there's witnesses or there's rape and you're able to get tested, or you have marks and bruises. But a lot of assault isn't rape. There isn't semen to collect. There isn't bruises. There isn't. So I think not shying away from it and talking about the reality of what we have to deal with and what we go through, men and women, because men also are assaulted by men and women, and not glorifying the little things, the things that really aren't. So-and-so maybe said that I looked nice in this dress. I was, how dare they harass me? Not being ridiculous about it, and not looking for ways to be a victim, not finding things to find wrong, or looking for things to find wrong so that you can bathe in victimhood, instead focusing on the real problems and the real issues where there are people in power that are abusing people, and assault isn't just rape. And it's not just people in power. It's every day, everywhere that you go. But I don't know if that makes sense. I feel like that people are just, people that find power in victimhood are really, really doing a disservice to victims of rape and assault and harassment and even molestation, by celebrating victimhood. I don't know if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I mean, I really wanted to talk about the fact that you were mentioning there how there's no evidence in a lot of these cases. For example, I saw a very long interview with, it was like the ex-assistant of Harvey Weinstein, and I think they were in Cannes or something like that, and she wasn't sexually assaulted, but she was in the hotel when Harvey tried to rape a woman, and then the woman went to the assistant. They went to the police. They went and got a lawyer. They wanted to press charges. Everything you'd really tried to rape her, and she was extremely emotionally distraught when she went to this assistant. And I mean, she wasn't raped. So there was, like you said, there's no semen, there's no like physical DNA evidence. It's just, this attempted assault. So being it's her word against his, being there's no like, physical evidence too much, they just had to settle out. Right. And a major part of the conversation with Me Too movement is just believing women. Flat out, just whoever makes an accusation, believe them. This is probably one of the most touchiest subjects, I think, of the whole Me Too movement, and how to address that. How to address the fact that you're just going to believe women. For example, that situation right there, it really was just her word against Harvey's. If you listen to the account, that interview I saw, I think, wow, that woman really deserves justice, right? That woman really, there should have been some consequence, major consequence to Harvey Weinstein when that happened. But there's no evidence. It's at the end, it's just her word against his. So I completely understand why women, and a lot of people are saying the solution to this is that we just immediately believe the victims. Without evidence, if they state it, believe them. And everybody with a lot of pride will put on Twitter, like, I just believe women immediately. This causes so much problems. I know everyone says, like, well, it's such a small minority of the men who are falsely accused. I have no idea how little that really happens. It's impossible to be sure exact. I'm sure it's not half the occasion. I'm sure it's like, if it was a percentage, I would have no doubt it's 10%. Who knows the real percentage of how much that happens. But just today, Jen, I posted a news article about a man who was released from prison after more than 31 years. 31 years, Jen. He came out and he received $1 million out of jail because he was falsely accused of rape. 31 years. And
what happened to the woman who accused him?
It didn't say in the article I read. This is just like new story. What I did look up, because everybody who was commenting, the most typical comment was, he just got $1 million? More than 31 years of his life. This man lost all his 20s, his 30s, his 40s. And all he got was $1 million. So I read another article that was this one on the BBC, and although this was, I think, in Tennessee that this happened in the United States, but it said that he only could get $1 million because that's the maximum the state could give him. That's what his basically half his life was worth in prison over a false accusation, was $1 million.
Wow.
And they even described like how he walks out of jail and they just give him like a stipend of $75. It's like, hey, get started. That's it. Like, imagine in the United States, $75 walking out of jail after 30 plus years. And so just look at that one guy. Are you telling, like, his life doesn't matter? That this happened to him is just insignificant?
I've seen women say that. Well, I don't care if men. Yeah.
Do you remember that woman, Emily Linden?
Yeah, that was really bad.
Teen Vogue woman who said she said she doesn't care if innocent men go to jail or lose their jobs or something like that. She said, but she's flat out said she didn't care. Oh, and the man I'm talking, and a lot of people attacked her. Was like, so you don't care for example, they were trying to get her via identity politics, saying, so you don't care if black men are falsely accused of rape by white women. They don't have to go that way, but it's obviously they were going to pin her into a corner, right? The man I'm talking about now from Tennessee, that was a black man, right? And this happened, 30 plus years ago. It was like in the late 70s, I think it was. You can't.
What kind of monster do you have to be to let a person go to jail for saying that they raped you?
The story was, I don't know if it was that malicious, is that it was a break-in and a rape, I think, of 3 men into her home. And she identified this man as one of them, but and he got out only now. I don't know why it took so long. I didn't really get that point from the article, but all the DNA that that was there, none of it belonged to him. And I guess they came to more conclusions.
Oh, they finally tested it?
I don't know if they finally tested. I have no idea. I don't know.
Did he break into her house? Was he even
no
one of the ones that broke in?
From what I understand, no. From what I understand, he wasn't involved in this at all. It was breaking news today. It was a few hours before we started recording, and I tried to look as many details as I could.
There's not a lot, but there's been far too many instances of women sending men to jail saying that they were raped. And women, because it's attention, it's positive attention when you claim to be abused by anybody. If you say like that woman in the UK that went to jail because she accused, I think it was 6 different guys or some ridiculous amount.
Falsely of rape?
Yeah, but she finally went to prison for it because she'd done it so many times. But I think that there should be really stiff penalties. See, that's the other thing. If say you're a woman and you accuse a man of rape and it really happened, but you couldn't prove it, and so they said,
and then you go to jail. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So here's my thing. Like, before, I mean, you can talk more about this if you want, but what my point on this is, okay, women can get sexually assaulted or raped, and let's say, for some reason too much time has passed or whatever, and there's no physical evidence, it's just her word against his. And then the only solution that people can think of is just, well, believe every woman. And then on the opposite side, a false accusation of rape could lead to the person going to prison, or if not, just destroying their lives. No, they're destroying their career, destroying their families, destroying their reputation forever. And it could be a false accusation if there's no evidence. Now, what is the perfect solution that we can actually get the real rapists and all the time and not and discover these false accusations of rape? What is the perfect solution to that? I have no clue. I have no idea. I don't think anybody has figured this out. This is why there's these really messy, like methods that people are trying to think up. I mean, if you go by just believe every woman, how quickly will a lot of women start to abuse that rule? I mean, okay, again, It's not going to be most of them, maybe, but I mean, it just shocks me that people are just going to be like, well, collateral damage, some men are just going to have to deal with it. You're destroying families. You're destroying people at that moment. You
can't say collateral damage for that. But I've heard women say, well, why would a woman falsely accuse a man of rape?
There's tons of reasons it could happen. If anybody's going to argue it never happens, that's silly. If anybody's going to argue that it's half the time that it's fake, I wouldn't believe that either. It is a minority, but it does happen. I don't know the solution to it. I'm so conflicted about it. For example, now we have all these stories coming out of people where there's not like, for example, somebody like Bill Cosby or Harvey Weinstein, where we are coming to the conclusion they are guilty by the sheer amount of women coming out. And I agree. Like there's just no way all these women, some of them who are really famous and reputable, are all saying similar things and the same thing. It's just like, duh. I mean, obviously there's something to this. Like, you have to be an idiot not to see it. But
how sad.
But you're not going to have that situation all the time, right? And I can't look up, every detail to every rape case. Nobody can. I mean, we know about Bill Cosby and Harvey Weinstein because they're famous people. What about everyone else? I don't know. I can't live my life trying to figure out every rape case. I really don't know. I don't know the solution to this. If anybody thinks like, Lalo, you're stupid and I have the perfect solution, message me. I don't know. I'm stupid. I'm really stupid. I mean, I'm trying. I'm really trying to figure all this stuff out. I'm interested. This is why I spent the time to read Rose McGowan's book, and I'm looking up and watching all this stuff because I care, and I see that there's a big problem that I didn't know was around. And then maybe I'm just a fucking idiot for not knowing it. But as soon as I discovered there was something there, I do want to know more. And I really think there's a lot of good guys out there, though. Not everyone is an asshole. Not everyone's a misogynist. They just don't know. It took a lot of work for me to figure this all out. A lot of men may sound like dicks online, but I guarantee you it's just that they don't know exactly what's going on. And the most outspoken feminists are way too aggressive for men to approach the subject. My recommendation, I would say to men who are listening, who are very suspicious of a lot of what they hear, do what I did when I saw that video of the woman walking in New York. Ask friends. Because like we were saying, like they're not going to come out and tell you a lot of times. I never had an initiative. It never occurred to me to ask this. It was that video that kind of sparked a small thing, small little thing. Like, oh, have you been catcalled? You know, start with that. Ask female friends. Ask women you know. Have you been catcalled? How often? Have you had been sexually harassed at work? How was that? Did it, like, what happened there? Like, when you talk to other women, what is their experience? Ask.
Well, just ask and listen, and don't presume that you already know. Because, like guys like to mansplain to women what it is to be a woman and what women think and feel. Lalo, I could go down the list of every man that's ever done anything, all the men that hurt me when I was little, the men that hurt me. I mean, my situation being in an oppressive cult environment as a child, and then going into Islam, and then the extremist parts of Islam, and living in countries where rape was a normal thing. Women are second-class citizens, and they're just things to use. Obviously, my situation and my experiences are completely different than what people normally, like we talked about, like Rose.
Yeah.
But I never got justice or any kind of closure with any situation where I was raped, molested, hurt, whatever, right?
From what I know, none of them, right? None.
Yeah,
none. Not a single thing. Yeah.
Some of them are dead now. Right. Whatever. Old age, drugs, whatever it is there. That was my closure. The fact that they died, and I didn't have to ever think that they were breathing and enjoying life. But in those situations, when I did tell somebody, because starting from when I was a little girl, and it started with the very first man that ever did anything to me, and I was told that I was lying and I was making it up. And as I got older and more things happened with different people, I kept telling, and I kept being blamed or accused of making it up, or told to shut up about it because it's going to rock the boat, or all these things, culminating to when I was raped and told, and I was shunned because of it, because in an Islamic environment that reflects very badly on the woman. And so people made, like, really hurt me and my ex-husband because of it, because I was a dirty whore, basically. But I stopped telling because there was no point. I was never believed, and it was really always my word against theirs. I mean, when I was a very little girl, maybe if somebody had listened, if my parents did listen to me and believed, they could have done something. The police could have done something, stopped it. That never happened. So there was never any kind of, it just was allowed to happen. And it was just part of the culture, and it was just this thing. So you're asking people that have been hurt over and over and over again, not even in my situation, but anyone that's been raised in a, like, sexually repressed kind of cult environment or religious environment, or just anybody, but that's been through that. You're asking them to put aside all of that, all of the pain, all of the hurt, all of the conditioning, and react to the situation the way you think that they should react. Otherwise, it's not real. So it's hard when you're saying, just believe women and believe what they say. We've talked about this. That's my first inclination. I want to just say, of course she's telling the truth. But you really have to take each case individually, and you can't just automatically say, believe the woman. As much as I want to.
It's hard because, I mean, seeing so many of these testimonies, in the Weinstein cases or whatever else it is, you really want justice for these women. I mean, I see it. I'm just like, oh my God, it's just, there is no evidence that they could get real justice a lot of the time, but you want it for them so bad.
I
But
want justice for them for me because I feel like I have to fight my instinct is to fuck every man, fuck them all. I hate them all. They're all pigs. They're all disgusting. And of course they would do those horrible things to those women. So of course I believe those women. That's my that's natural what comes, but I have to fight that and I have to say, um, those men also deserve to have themselves be believed. I have men in my life that I love. They're not all bad. They're not all rapists and horrible people. I don't want my son to have to worry that some woman is going to accuse him of doing something and he doesn't get a chance to defend himself or say, no, that didn't happen. Because women don't lie about that, but they do.
unfortunately, they do. Unfortunately, I mean, I've been around and I've met a lot of people and I've dated all around the world, and there are unfortunately there are a lot of crazy people. There are crazy men and there are crazy women as well, and people lie and people are spiteful and people want attention and people are dishonest. I mean, that's
Yeah.
another thing. Like, my inclination is also that most people are very dishonest.
Yep.
They're not really, straightforward and always telling the truth. I'm more suspicious of people than trusting, especially over time. I think, anyone gets older, I think you start to get more suspicious of others.
Yes.
So yeah, again, you're in between a rock and a hard place where there's real victims who don't get justice, who you want there to be justice for, but then there's just like, it's not a perfect world where everyone is going to tell the truth. That's just not the world we're going to live in, where every rape accusation is going to be 100% honest. It's just, I don't
I
know.
I know that I have this is a very emotional subject for me. Um, I could get like I said, I could get really, really personal and get and talk about individual things and disgust anyone that's listening to it. I mean, to hear it would be really hard to listen to. I can't take my experiences and expect everyone else to change their behavior or to demonize men because the majority of men in my life have done something terrible. Um, you choose the people that you bring into your life. So when you're raised in and you're used to being abused and say in my situation told my whole life that I was less than a man, that the only thing I could ever hope to be was a wife and a mother, and any time that I talked about being hurt or when I went with the molestation things, there was always the blame was put on me, right? Through all of that and through I don't even know. I don't even know what I'm trying to say. You can't you can't generalize and blame everyone for the anger that you have. I have so much anger and so much hurt and so much intense emotions surrounding this that I want to be angry for everyone else. You've seen it.
Yes, I've seen it. I've seen it.
I want to swoop in and just be like, "Rah, I got this. I'm gonna fight
And I've
for
seen you in
everyone
that
else."
mode sometimes. Yeah.
So I have to fight that all the time because I was the helpless victim. Like I didn't have any power. And so when I feel powerful now, I don't feel power in victimhood. I feel power in I'm the one with the sword. I'll white knight you. I'll save you. That's where I find my strength because I decided that I wasn't going to be a victim anymore. That I was going to be a survivor and how important the power was. I do not do well with being told what to do or controlled in any way now. And I think when you have been through all those things and suffered abuse like that and horrific things have happened and your power has been taken away and you've been made to be vulnerable and ashamed. And I think you can find strength in being a victim. I don't know. This whole thing's going to have to get cut out, but like
yeah.
what I'm trying to like, I don't know how to explain like what I'm trying to, what am I trying to say? I don't know how to explain it. It's like a feeling that it's so intense. The emotions are so intense and you're so angry that you can't think clearly. So that's kind of what I'm trying to say. Like it's clouding your judgment.
I mean, that was a good thing about, this is why I keep mentioning the movie, and I think everyone should watch it who can, is Cairo 678, is that they really show well how a woman starts to break down emotionally and psychologically through just constant minor abuses on public transportation. It's very well shown. And and there's the book by Rose McGowan that I read, like also she's a person who was clearly is suffering a lot of emotional distress. You can see it. I mean, it's clear in any interview there. I don't say that as an attack on her. I have nothing but sympathy for her. That's why, I mean, I didn't go out of my way to read her book to attack this poor woman. It's just, I just feel bad for her, but that is there, right? And I understand. And once you hear all that, you see, like, I think what you're getting at is the buildup of emotion and anger that explodes at some point. Yeah. And all I can offer to the conversation, which I think is something that is not talked about enough, is that the clueless guy, right? I know a lot of guys even going to probably reject this idea, but we are very clueless about it. And women have to kind of understand that. I say this also as kind of an accusation towards women. Remember that we're clueless. You're saying you start to build up all these emotions and all these experiences and you want to blow up on people. But I think that a lot of the pushback that comes from men is more from them being clueless than misogynistic. And women confuse cluelessness with misogyny. You're not taking seriously what I'm saying because you hate women. No, they don't know what you're talking about.
Oh.
And
yes.
And I'm telling you this as a person, like, I was in that mode. I would like, I mean, I don't think I ever pushed back or I had arguments with feminists about this. I do definitely recognize how clueless I was about this.
So it's not necessarily them being like, because I do that's kind of also what I was saying, is that because the emotion is so intense, you have the natural instinct or inclination to assume the other person is coming from a bad place.
Yes, you assume bad intentions. And also I understand, because it's, again, going back to the experience of talking with my girlfriend and all the people after that video, they talked about their experiences so nonchalantly, like it was mundane, like it was typical, like, duh, this happens, right? So I imagine when women talk about this to men, they think, well, you must already, I assume you know about what's happening to me. This has happened so much to all women, you got to know. But we don't know. There's not, it's not told to us. It's not depicted enough. It's not talked about enough, except now with the Me Too movement. And some people are getting it. Some people, because it's not like a hashtag is not the best way to communicate this. I mean, I wouldn't have got this from a hashtag. I wouldn't have. No. I mean, one of the best, a good way I would even suggest of like kind of understanding this, maybe listen to even some of the podcast episodes I've done in Law de Gosh podcast with some of the women I've interviewed. Those conversations have helped me in a huge part. Read some, I mean, this is why I'm also mentioning books or a movie, and there's a lot more material out there that probably I'm not aware of. And if anybody wants to like DM me or tweet at me and tell me like there's this great book or this movie or whatever documentary, let me know, because there's a lot more things to know about this. And the material you get from a lot of feminists is very vitriolic, very aggressive. It's not going to convince men who don't know about this subject. And I mean, that's all I can really contribute to it, is just, I know the position of being a clueless guy. And I think that's most guys. You know, that like there are men who have suffered sexual abuse, like real sexual abuse, like just take as an example what is it, tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of sexual abuse victims of just the Catholic Church all around the world.
Yeah.
Mostly men. In that case, that's one of the cases where it's mostly men.
Even in my family, the sexual abuse, most of it was boys.
Really?
My father, my brothers.
Wow, I didn't know that.
My father was raped at the age of 8.
Oh, I don't think you told me that.
So it's very, which I think part of the reason why he was kind of nonchalant about my abuse, because he normalized it too, you know, because it just, my father was never an abuser, but he didn't take care of his children when my brother also was raped. So it wasn't me being the only girl. In my immediate family of the boys, none of my brothers except for the one ever molested me or did anything to me. And the one that did had been raped by a man when he was very young, so he already had some issues. But it was just all right on down the line. My father's brother, my grandfather, they all had been abused by men.
Yeah, I don't know what else to say about this subject, really. Was there anything you would add, Jen, I guess, before we end?
Oh my gosh. While we're talking, there's so many things that come up, and then I lose them.
Okay, by the way, everybody, me and Jen suffer the worst ADD. ADD. What is it also called?
ADHD.
ADHD in the United States.
Attention deficit.
Yeah, when I was little, it was ADD. But yeah, we have really bad attention deficit disorder. Both of us. It's horrible.
Yeah.
So in this podcast, you're going to hear us go off the rails a lot into some tangent. So
that's the nice thing about it, though, because we always go off on interesting tangents. It's never like boring. So
right,
you know, it'll be a surprise.
Yeah, yeah.
The thing about the vitriolic feminists, I want to talk about feminism, not in this podcast, but it kind of ties into it. I'm of two minds about feminism. But I've watched conversation get shut down because of women being vitriolic and angry and attacking men for not, you know, you're misogynistic, you're not listening, whatever it is, right? I've seen these far too many times. Even it's happened to you. So you, it shuts down any kind of conversation. You're not going to be open-minded or open to hearing because you're on the defensive already. When the conversation starts out as an attack or an accusation and already assuming that you're coming from a bad place, you're going to be on the defensive. So
definitely. I mean, that happens to me still, and I still and I still like I won't engage in the conversation then because what else can I do? It happens all the time still. I can't start a conversation with somebody insulting me.
Right. It's bad faith and bad form. I think it's important to keep that in mind. Part of me, when you said that you kind of have to baby step walk men through because they may not know, part of me gets angry and part of me says, well, fuck them. They should know anyway. Why is it my job when my entire life and throughout history, men have been walked through things and they have special privileges and it's all about the men. And, you know, part of me automatically has that, like, fuck them. Yeah. And then I have that's where I have to fight. That's when I was talking about anger and buildup of resentment and the buildup of the emotions and it clouding judgment and not really being able to have a good conversation because you have all these. It might be a stereotype, the emotional woman, or I don't like that. I don't think that that's fair. But when you've been through a lot and you've suffered through things like that. Do you know what I mean? It's going to affect the way you think and act. And like I said, I have to be aware of how I initially feel like I have to react to something, or not that I have to, the way I react to something initially. I am aware that that's my, what's the word?
Default?
Yes, thank you. That's my default position because of the things I've been through. So I have to, if I'm aware of that, then I can move beyond that and I can start to have a good conversation, or I can open dialogue in a non-aggressive way. I'm not always good at it, but I'm aware that that's the way I am automatically, like you said, my default position. I think it's really important that people that have been through the kinds of things that I've been through, or people that feel very strongly about this, are also aware that they have a default position that's going to be clouded or based on what they've been through. So you kind of have to have more of an open mind. It's the same way with talking to anyone that has a different kind of ideology than you, or just a difference of opinion. You have to open up and take that in and not automatically shut down. When you're having a conversation with somebody and you're listening, I'm not going to use you and me as an example, because I think you and I only listen to every other word that comes in until the second time we have the same conversation, then the rest of it comes in. But most people, when they're having conversations and they're kind of put on the defensive, when the other person is talking, they're already thinking of their response before listening. So as this person is talking, they're like, okay, I'm going to respond with this, this, and this, instead of taking it all in and then coming up with the response, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, that's why I think a lot of times the best materials to watch are an interview, read a book, watch a movie about this, because if you're on the defensive in a debate, you're thinking about winning, right, and being right, and it's not really it's not the best place to start from. And also, I mean, if you start vitriolically and angry and stuff and it's also very counterintuitive, Jen, that the problem in these situations is that the people we should be listening to are the victims, but those people by default are gonna be very emotional about this subject, not level-headed a lot of the time. So I mean, think about any other subject you would be looking into: medicine, history. Are you looking to the most emotional people or the most level-headed, rational people? You're looking for the most level-headed and rational. But in this situation, we're looking for the people with the experience, but they are going to be the most emotional. I'm not saying that you shouldn't look to those people. You should, but then it's a double-edged sword. Is it a double-edged sword? I don't know. I don't know what like the right analogy here, but you see what I'm trying to say, right? Is that we're going to end up talking to a lot of people who are emotional about this subject because it touches them on a very personal, negative way, right? And I see that. I mean, when like I was saying, you get material like a documentary or an interview. I'm watching a very emotional person at that moment. That's not the same as watching a person who's talking about a subject in a very rational way. But
we have to take that into consideration for sure. And I don't think people do, though.
People reject a person who's being too emotional.
Yes.
Right. And that's not a bad position to take on most things. If I saw a person arguing about history or math, and I'm less likely to listen to the most emotional person versus the most calm, rational one. That's my intuition. On this subject, that's not going to happen, right? So you have to listen to people who are very emotional and are talking in a way that's making you really uncomfortable, because it's not easy to listen to this stuff. It makes it very emotionally exhausting to watch. It's not the typical thing you sit and watch people talk about being sexually abused. I don't even.
As you have to be aware of that too, as the person that's talking about it, as the victim or the survivor. You also have to be aware of you being emotional and how it's affecting other people too. Like, it's a lot. It's not black and white, and it's there's so much emotion and hurt that goes into it. You're asking somebody that's been through all that to also remember other people. But I would want the same of me. Like I just think it's healthier all around. But you could tell the people that have gotten better and kind of worked through, you're always working through it, and it's always going to be there in your life. It affects everything you do, of course. But you could see the people that have been able to kind of move past it. And I mean, you've seen my journey, and you've seen how there are times when I am not so good at controlling my emotions, or, I make bad decisions, but I'm also very aware of it. And I'm like, oh, I maybe really needed to control that or approach it differently, where I'm always growing and learning and changing and adjusting to how it affects other people too. It's not just all about me. Everything is not all about me. And what I do and what I say also affects a lot of other people, especially being, not that I'm in the public eye, but kind of, sort of. If
you have a public online presence, at least.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's a responsibility that goes with that too. I just, it's not fair. Life isn't fair. And you have to take that into consideration if you're going to be public and you're going to speak out and you're a survivor. And I can't tell you, when I go into details of things, and I do sometimes, we'll talk about things that are uncomfortable and very graphic, because enough people aren't talking about it. And I think, and it is a double-edged sword, because I get people that will say, why are you even talking about this? It's always bad things have happened to you. And, you're a victim. And when I point out the fact that I don't talk about being a victim, I talk about the things that I've been through, what I've learned from them, and how I'm a survivor. And there is a big difference. And what I get is people thanking me and saying, now I feel comfortable, I can say something too. So I do think there's a responsibility there, and nobody's perfect, and everyone needs to be more aware of what they say and what they do and how it affects people. And in this particular subject, like you said, emotion, we reject people that are overly emotional, and for the most part, that's right. But the overly emotional people that in this, how am I trying to? It's important that everyone is a little bit more sensitive when it comes to this, and I think that's lost on a lot of people.
I would also say everyone needs to be a little bit more charitable to the other. Like, women need to be a little bit more charitable to men, in the sense that don't assume they know what you're talking about. If you recognize that the woman's experience is different from the man, assume the man is ignorant and just doesn't know what you're talking about, and you can't come full force angry to talk about it, because don't be surprised if you do come at him like that, he's gonna pull back. It sucks. I know there's a lot of emotion, but you gotta have some charity when it comes to how they're gonna react. And the men, because there's a big pushback now from, like, especially conservative men, saying to a lot of crazy ideas about gender that we're all the same, and these men are, a lot of people on a conservative side are saying, no, genders are different. Okay, if you recognize genders are different, recognize that your experience therefore will be different.
Yep.
And your experience being different means you got to look into what the other person's experience is, and that's what I was missing a lot too. Even though I would look to women's experience, but only as far as I could see them. Mm-hmm. Like the saying goes, like, walk a mile in my shoes kind of thing, right? Like, watching a person walk is not the same as actually getting the idea of what it is to walk in their shoes. And it's hard. It's not easy, because you can't actually do it. I can't actually walk a mile in a woman's shoes, right? I got to circumvent this and try to get it through just like testimony and listening. And
Empathy.
Empathy, basic empathy. So everyone has to be a lot more charitable to one another, but just internet is not the best place for. Well, not just internet. I mean, even I see these university campus, talks and get-togethers, meetings, whatever it is, and there's people, protesting and screaming. No one's gonna get it. No one's gonna get it that way. Like you can't come as angry feminists and pull fire alarms and yell at men. Like they're not gonna get any, like nothing. No, every time, all of that stuff I've seen, I think I've learned a lot. I mean, I'll pat myself on the back a little bit here, but I think I've learned a lot. Nothing of what I've learned has come from that. Nothing, not a single thing. If anything, it just makes me reject that kind of new wave feminism kind of stuff.
When has that ever been a way to get your point across?
Maybe
work. As a stroppy little kid.
Yeah.
It just, those ideas are going to exist anyway. And those people have a right to say whatever they're going to say, and people have a right to hear it. But you coming in and being like, no one's going to hear you because you're hateful. If your arguments are good and sound, then you can come up with an argument besides pulling the fire alarm and screaming.
Yeah. It's not helping anyone.
No.
It's not helping your cause. It's not helping men understand.
I've seen people celebrate this. Like, we're celebrating shutting down speech and keeping people from telling their stories. And I just...
Well, Jen, let me ask you this. We spend a lot of time online, right? We see a lot of podcasts, Twitter, Facebook, whatever you want, like YouTube. Do you see a lot of feminists talking about this kind of stuff, Me Too movement, sexual harassment, catcalling, all this stuff, and inviting on men to have civil, real conversations about it? I don't.
No.
And maybe this is an assumption, but I don't even see them trying. And I don't think it's because men are unwilling to have that conversation. I think it's more the other side is not willing to engage with them and have that conversation, when those conversations would work really well.
They would, actually. I mean, they obviously have men on, but the men already agree with them. They're already, there'll be male feminists and feminists talking together, but there's no, it's like hearing, Lalo, I never even considered men not knowing that women go through that.
But Jen, don't you also know, like, the male feminists you're kind of describing they seem to just be men who go into like a podcast or a room or whatever it is, and they just seem to be nodding along mindlessly. It's not like, I don't see them really asking questions about stuff they're probably ignorant about. It's just like, oh, tell me about you. Oh, yes, everything you say is true. It doesn't seem to me like a genuine conversation. It seems to me like, I don't know a better word for it. It just seems like virtue signaling. Like, just like, oh, you're a woman, tell me everything. When it's not like that. Like, you're not finding out anything.
That's true.
And I don't think they get it. I think they're just looking, like, most of the guys, I got to say, that I see doing that, these male feminists, they look like they're more looking for approval from women, that they are virtuous, versus really understanding what's happening to women. So I mean, I really don't see anything. I don't see anything really productive from anyone, the left or the right. I gotta say,
talking to like an everyday guy, right? So hearing from you that you didn't really realize that women go through that, say even with the catcalling thing, to hear that from a man that isn't, you're not a feminist, that's not your thing, you're not hanging out with
yeah, when I asked that question, I wasn't trying to become a feminist. It was purely coincidental. It was just like, it was like I saw a YouTube video and suddenly, like, my mind's being rocked. Right,
and so, and you admitting that and talking about it, that changes everything for me. Like, I hadn't even thought about that. Now I'm like, maybe they don't. Maybe they're not just assholes that just, maybe they're not all pigs. You know what I mean? It changes things.
I hope so.
It's important to have those conversations.
I hope so. I mean, that's what I'd like to see more. Just like, and it doesn't, I don't think feminists have to necessarily go to like male rights activists, like anti-fem. They don't have to go that far away from their position. Go to the more average person who just doesn't know, right? Just the Joe Schmo kind of guy. Maybe even like the anti-feminist. Sometimes those conversations would be good too, but I don't know. It's just, I mean, also just talking about this, it was very complicated to even think to have this kind of podcast because it's a minefield. I mean, everything I just said in this podcast can be like nitpicked and, Lala said that about women, Lala said this. And it's just like, and then it's just any little thing you say about sex and women and assault, it can come down on you so hard. It's not the best subject to touch on. And it makes people like, why would I even do it? Right. Like I can imagine most people like, why would I even touch this subject? It's so toxic. It can hurt me so bad. Just stay away from it. A lot in the back of my head. That's what I'm thinking. Right. But just because I've been looking into this so much and I care so much, I'm like, fuck it. I think I have to do it. But my first intuition is like, Lalo, don't do it. Don't do it. Don't run into this minefield. It's not going to be good. But yeah. And that's another thing. If you make this conversation so toxic that any wrong comment, you'll go out and destroy man for it. No man is going to want to talk about it. No man is going to want to walk into a podcast or have a podcast and discuss this. Again, you have to be more charitable. Yes, a lot of guys are going to be talking out their ass. I bet you I've talked out of my ass a lot in this very podcast because I don't know what the fuck I'm talking about. So that's, I think, most of my opinion on this subject for now. Still trying to learn a lot, and God, is it a complicated and contentious subject? It's what?
It's a minefield.
It's a minefield.
There's so many things to talk about, so many angles to go over, and just experiences and instances where we've seen and heard things, and I don't know. There's just so much to talk about. Yes.
Yeah. I don't know what else to say really about this. So, but I mean, I'm very thankful to Jen, being a friend I found online almost 3 years ago, I guess now, who has had a very different life from mine, being in 2 fundamentalist religions and just very different backgrounds, and we get along so well, and we're very good friends, and now we're starting this podcast together, and I think there's always a lot we always are learning from one another. So I'm glad I'm glad we're going down this journey together with Jen.
Me too. I think it's going to be fun. I think it'll be nice to just be able to talk about things that other people aren't talking about as much, maybe. Change of pace.
Yes.
Nice.
Yes. It'll be fun.
And we get on really well.
Yeah. We'll talk. We're going to be talking about quite a bit more things in the future. So thank you for listening to our podcast.
This was uncomfortable.
This is amazingly uncomfortable. I need a break for like a week after this. Yeah. See you next time.
Yeah. Thanks. Bye.
I'm gonna demonize biotechnology, 'cause that's my liberal philosophy. Condemn the things that I don't understand. At least I've been on borders in my leftist wonderland. Get out of here, bigots. I don't wanna know ya. I feel your fear of FGM is nothing but Islamophobia. I wanna see labels on those evil GMOs. I think you'll find a real terrorist and them guys at Monsanto. Go, 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 go. I'm so liberal. Go, go, go.
You were just listening to an episode of People of the Podcast. You can check us out on YouTube, SoundCloud, and iTunes. Don't forget to subscribe and stop by our Facebook page and give us a like. You can also follow us on Twitter. Links are in the description.
And if you wish to contribute, you can donate to us on Patreon. We have a lot of rewards to come, and with your help, we can make better quality content for you. Thank you for listening.